YouTube to catch up. Excellent. We are in module number 3. This one is always fun because you're going to do some hands-on stuff. This is all about malware, malicious software. Always a fun subject. First and foremost, malware is the correct industry term for what it is. There used to be a time when malware was very specific, where there was a piece of malware that was just a Trojan horse, a piece of malware that was just a virus, a piece of malware that was just a worm. That's no longer the case and hasn't been the case for quite some time. Current malware uses a variety of functionalities from different places. So a piece of malware could be a ransomware, could also be a Trojan, could also be a worm. So as I go through these various definitions, please remember that it is no longer true that a piece of malware is one or the other. Current malware just takes components, takes characteristics and behaviors from these different places and puts them together. So please don't get confused when industry talks about malware and they talk about these different components in different stages, and it all sounds like different things because that's what malware does nowadays. It is a mix of these things all put together. It is not wise to try to classify current malware into these specific boxes that I'll be going through. The first one is ransomware. It takes over a computer and demands a ransom. This can also include crypto malware, which encrypts the files and holds them hostage, threatening to report the user to law enforcement due to pirated software or pornography, expose sensitive information or pictures from the victim's drive. One of the most important defenses against ransomware is an effective backup system, storing files in separate locations that are air-gapped and won't be impacted by ransomware. Trojan horses are a type of malware that is disguised as legitimate software. They rely on unsuspecting individuals to run them, providing attackers with a path into the system or into the device. Remote access Trojans, otherwise known as rats, provide attackers with remote access to those systems. Some remote access tools are legitimate, making identifying tools on the network much more difficult. Trojans are combated in both security awareness trainings for users and anti-malware tools. Worms spread through automated means, as well as things like email attachments, network file shares, and other methods. Worms self-install into systems. Rootkits are specifically designed to allow attackers to access a system. They have the capability to conceal themselves from detection through file system drivers, infecting startup code in the master boot record, and so on. A system infected with a rootkit can no longer be trusted. While some tools can detect and remove specific rootkits, most common recommendation is whenever possible to spend the money and rebuild the system, or if possible, restore from a known backup. But again, the whole point of the rootkit is to establish itself with pretty deep persistence So more than likely, you'll have to fork over the money for a new system. Oh, there's one more to this. Backdoors, method or tools that provide access that bypasses normal authentication and authorization procedures, allowing attackers to access the system, device, or application. Backdoors can be hardware or software based. And a note to self, Security Plus focuses more on the software backdoors. Trojans and rootkits often include a backdoor so that attackers can access the infected system. Backdoors are also used by software and hardware manufacturers to provide ongoing access and support. These are a concern as they are not normally disclosed, and if discovered by attackers, can gain access without you knowing. Detecting backdoors can be done with things like port scanning, baselining networks, in order to detect odd traffic. Now, bots, botnets, and DDoS. Remotely controlled system or devices that have a malware infection. That is the definition of a bot. It is a remotely controlled system with a malware infection. A group of these is a botnet, which are used by attackers who control them to perform various actions, from additional compromises and infection to denial of service attack. And by the way, a denial of service attack is nothing more than an annoyance. Many botnet command and control, or CNC, systems operate in client-server mode. Bots contact the central control system, which provides updates and instructions. CNC communications can be over internet relay chat, or over HTTPS, or over DNS, or over DHCP, or any other known and approved of protocol. Peer-to-peer networks connect bots to each other, making it harder to track down a single control server. Encrypted peer-to-peer traffic can be exceptionally difficult to identify without network behavioral analysis. Botnets rely on a combination of their size and the number of systems that are in them to overwhelm applications and systems, as well as make it impossible to identify legitimate traffic. Identifying a botnet-driven DDoS attack requires monitoring network traffic, trends, and upstream visibility from an ISP. Security information and event management, or SIEM systems, can correlate data from multiple sources for behavioral analysis to identify DDoS traffic from typical traffic patterns. Again, DDoSes are pretty hard to detect. Botnets are hard to detect because they are sophisticated and do their best to hide in normal traffic. Because when's the last time you're going to block HTTPS? Every site is using it. And botnet creators know this, so they will send their traffic over HTTPS. Keyloggers capture keystrokes from keyboards, mouse movement, touchscreen inputs, or even credit card swipe. Keyloggers work by capturing data in the kernel, the APIs, the script, or directly from memory. Regardless of the method, keyloggers capture input to be analyzed and used by an attacker. And you have both the hardware and the software. Logic bombs are functions of code that are placed inside other programs that will activate when a set condition are met. They are a consideration in software development and system management. They can have a significant impact if they successfully activate, like self-destruct. Viruses are malicious programs that self-copy and self-replicate. They require one or more infection mechanisms to spread themselves, paired with a search capability to find new places to spread. Viruses have a trigger, a set of conditions when the virus will execute, and a payload, which is what the virus will do, will deliver, or actions to perform. You have different types. You have the memory resident, who remains in memory while the device is running. The non-memory resident, who executes, will spread and shut down. The boot sector, who hides in the boot sector of a drive or storage media. Macros, which hide within word processing software. And email, who spread as attachments or part of the email itself using flaws within the client. There are also the fileless viruses, who spread via spam or malicious websites, exploiting flaws in the browser plugins or the browsers themselves. They inject themselves into memory and conduct further malicious activity, including the ability to reinfect after a reboot. At no point do they require any local file storage. Their trace would be the persistent technique, like a registry change. Spyware is designed to just simply obtain information about an individual, organization, or system. They track user browsing habits, installed software, etc., and report back. Some are innocuous, while others access the camera, microphone, and so on. Spyware is normally associated with identity theft and fraud, advertising, redirection of traffic, digital rights management monitoring, stalkerware, and whatever software teachers want to use to keep track of you when you take your test. Super dumb. Potentially unwanted programs, or PUPs, are typically installed without the user's awareness or as part of a software bundle with an installation. These include adware, browser toolbars, web browsing tracking programs, and etc. They can be detected and removed by most anti-malware programs. We have malicious code, scripts, and custom build code that can be used by malicious actors. These attacks happen locally or remotely, leveraging Windows PowerShell, Bash, Python on local systems. They live off the land, which is just another way of saying attackers utilize the local tools already installed, the native tools to the operating system, for malicious purposes. Because they're doing that, it's much harder to block. For example, there's a lot of installations of Python, and Python can be used for malicious purposes. Unless you're going to stop Python from working altogether, you kind of leave yourself vulnerable to these kinds of things. And can't forget AI. It's a developing field that attackers use AI for malicious purposes, of course. As AI and machine learning become increasingly common, the danger of training data that will drive machine learning systems to be intentionally or unintentionally tainted will continue to grow. You know, every new technology that arrives always provides an attacker with a new surface. So you have to stay up to date. You have to know what is coming down and be able to learn how to use it, learn how to defend it, because whatever is new is also going to be used for bad. And like I said at the start, all these things are not in and of themselves their own thing. They're all components of malware. That's just the way it is nowadays. Any questions? Anybody scared yet? Well, let's have some fun, some real fun. Oh, there's a good question. How can one defend against many of these? Well, a layered approach is number one. So yes, you need anti-malware tools. Even if you're on a Linux box, even if you're on a Mac, you need Linux, you need anti-malware tools. You need a good firewall that is watching over what's happening in and out of the network, and you should be keeping an eye on that. You should see what type of connections are being made, what domains are being accessed, and block things that are out of the ordinary. And the only way to do that part is by knowing what comes in and out of your network. That goes for your home network and your business network. Be aware of what domains are being asked, what protocols are being used. Figure out what is normal, and then you'll find the abnormalities. So having local tools, having network tools, having proper defense in depth, and training of all the users, continuous training of the users, are just ways to fight against all these different threats. Is it foolproof? Absolutely not. But it's better than having absolutely nothing. And the sad thing is, those things that I mentioned, this industry has been talking about for over 20 years, and still they are not all implemented because there's too much to it, because it's difficult, because it always changes. People get alert fatigue, but that's what you need to do. It's just like defending your home. There's a reason why the lock on your door, on your house door, is not the same one that we've been using since the ancient Egyptians. There's a reason why your key to your car is different from the one for your home, or the one that opens your garage, or the one that opens your safe. Good question. Any others? I particularly like to keep that one short because you're going to spend most of the time hands-on. So what I'm going to do for the recording purpose, I'm going to go over the steps, and then I'll cut the video and we'll just work on it because it's going to take a while and you're going to have a bajillion and one questions. And rather than recording 3 hours of dead space, we can throw the questions into Discord later so that others can catch up. There's a variety of good malware programs that I recommend. It all depends on what you have. I like things like, I've used things like Avast, I've used things like Bitdefender, F-Secure. I've used, Viper. I have Malwarebytes is also another good one. I also use tools on my network like Waza. ESET has been good. I use Splunk and Graylog. I even have my own something that I call packet wall that keeps track of all the packets that are coming in and out of my house. So whenever something is abnormal, a little light turns on and I can check it out later. There's a lot of good tools out there. You should have a defense in depth for everything. If you have Macs, there's a lot of local tools like the OpenC tools or Objective-C. Pretty awesome set of tools. They're similar to Windows Assist internals. So the thing that we'll be spending most of our time in is this, in Google Cloud, because you do not want to do this anywhere near your local system. You're going to make an Ubuntu VM following the instructions outlined earlier. You'll choose an N1.2 standard. Make sure that it's in the same region as your Windows VM. This is important. This is why it's highlighted. So again, you'll make a Windows and a Ubuntu VM together. Make sure they're in the same region. So you're taking the N1.2 standard. You want to choose anything that is in the CPU platform, anything that's Haswell or later in that Ubuntu box. Once you are logged in to that box, you're going to run a series of commands. You're going to clone a repository that I have and run a script. That script will take some time to build. It may ask you some questions. Let it run, let it do its thing, answer the questions. When you see this, you'll see that everything has completed. Yay. That's all of step one. Building that Ubuntu VM in the same region and zone as your Windows VM. Picking the N1 standard 2, selecting Haswell or later, cloning my repository and running a script. That's step one. Step two at that point will be to make some edits to the Linux VM that you made. You'll open up the Google Cloud Shell button. You'll get to your shell. You'll set your project to whatever project you're working on currently. We're going to follow the steps from this link to enable nested virtualization. After you follow those, you'll authorize, you'll follow those steps. This is me applying step one, which is those lines that are in that site. This is a screenshot of me applying step two successfully. And after I do that, back in the virtual machine, the one that I did the git clone to, I should have a number other than 0. So there's the example of I ran it and I got a 4, which is exactly what I was looking for. So a number other than 0 to tell me that nested virtualization is now enabled. After doing all that to the Linux VM, then I can remotely connect to that Ubuntu system through the Windows computer that we made earlier, that port 3391. You'll be prompted with something very similar to this. There's the username and password. You'll click on default config to get a GUI. Then you'll access VirtualBox. You'll import a OVA file. That will be an XP machine. You should get some error like this, but you should be able to hit continue. And you'll be welcomed into Windows. You'll need to, you need to enable the guest drag and drop so you can move files between. But all of this, you'll need to do a couple times over, because you're going to destroy this Windows XP virtual machine. So this guide will be your friend in telling you what to do to prepare your system, your cloud system, for regular infection. So yes, you are totally walking into the danger zone, because you're going to follow a guide that I also made to run real malware on that XP machine. You're going to purposefully infect the system and then work your way to disinfecting it. And what you're submitting is the process you spent to infect and disinfect from the various pieces of malware that are there. And then you can also do the any.run to see an analysis from a different site after you do it locally. Or not locally, but in the cloud. Does that make sense? You're setting up an Ubuntu VM for nested virtualization in the cloud because you do not want to do this locally. And that XP machine will be what you infect and reinfect and reinfect. And then after a infection, you reset the thing and start the next infection, writing down how you both infected and disinfected the system. Does that make sense? Questions before I stop the stream and we get started? Well, the first one, the guide will tell you what to do. The rest of them will be class teamwork. Because you're purposefully infecting, and you're basically going to treat this as though you are in the IT department of a company and one of your employees wonderfully clicked on a link and now infected the system. Now what do you do? What tools are you going to call upon? What are you going to do to disinfect the system? Okay, so let's get to work and I'll stop the recording. That way we don't have dead